Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Week 13 preview. I'm your host, Gamby, with my co-host, Brandon. And this week is all about the love story of Anna Kendrick and Anthony Beauvillier. Yep.
It sure is.
It is.
If you don't know what we're talking about, just go look up Anthony Beauvillier's most recent tweets and the results therein.
He took a huge gamble. December 25th, Christmas Day, decided to tweet out, "Hi, Anna Kendrick." And then a bunch of amazing hockey fans jumped in and started telling all these heroic stories about Anthony Beauvillier. True or not true is up to the reader. And then Anna Kendrick finally responded and actually gave him the light of day, which was amazing. No one expected that to happen, and yet she did. It was pretty amazing, actually.
Yep. What's not amazing is that now we've got, Pavel Francouz has changed the pronunciation of his name for the third time. No, the second time, I guess. It was Francouz, then Francouz, and now Francouz.
I hate it.
I don't know. I liked Francouz the best.
I liked Francouz. Francouz sounded nice. Sounded like a good soup. Francouz, it just doesn't roll off the tongue as nice. I don't know. Maybe someone should go over to Colorado and tell them, hey, you want to just leave it at Francouz for us? And then my first piece of the week review here is going to be about beliefs. I mean, I feel slightly bad that I've started, I think, 3 or 4 week reviews now with the Leafs, but this one I feel like is actually worth it. I saw a post today that mentioned that since Babcock's firing, the Leafs are first in the league. They're first in goals for, first in point percentage, first on the power play. They actually have a really good penalty kill now. I don't know where they land there, but they do have really good penalty kill. And they're 12-4 since the firing. So they've kind of turned it around. Seems like Babcock was a big part of the problem there.
Yeah, I guess that's not totally surprising, but I still don't know that we're going to see this. I think they're on a 6-game win streak now.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to see them normalize somewhere. I still think, they look good and that they should be a playoff team despite the start. But yeah, I don't know that it's going to be Flames the rest of the way. My first piece here is I don't understand what's going on with the Minnesota Wild. I really don't. As of this recording, which is the afternoon on Saturday, the Wild have 17 goals in their last 4 games played, and that includes getting shut out one time. So that's an over 6 goals per game scored for just them across 3 different games. And I just, you look at that team and how is this even happening? I mean, Zucker is not even playing, and that's not saying a whole lot, but for them it is. I don't understand. This whole thing's confusing to me.
It all makes sense. There's one word to explain it all away. Luck. There you go.
Except for Matt Dumba.
Except for Matt Dumba, who can't get in on anything, no matter what.
I think he finally got an assist. The rest of the Minnesota Wild have sold their soul to the devil or something.
100%. I mean, as we talked about in the holiday special, the Minnesota Wild are riding insane luck at the moment and insane shooting percentages across the entire team. And so at some point, I feel pretty confident this is all going to come crumbling down.
Yeah.
And then in terms of shooting percentages, one thing that's actually really interesting is from a league perspective. If you remember back to the very beginning of the season, we talked about scoring in the NHL and will it stay up? Are these insane levels going to continue? Are they going to reduce? What's going to happen, right? And so far, it seems like scoring, while it started to dip a little bit in the past month, now it's back up to higher than last year, quite a bit higher than last year. And so right now, we can say that scoring is actually up, and it might finish above 18-19 actually on a league-wide basis. And part of that, I think, we're not surprised. We said that Connor McDavid for like 120. We said Kucherov over 100. So there's still quite a few players over 100 that we projected, at least in the holiday special. So I'm not entirely surprised the scoring seems to be up. But if you go look, the guy who does it a lot is at Ineffective Math on Twitter, or Micah, who does Hockey Viz. And he tweets this out every week or so, like how scoring seems to be. And he's the one who just recently said, scoring seems to be way up, with a fancy little graph that if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put up here on the screen.
Yeah. It's kind of blows up a lot of my projections at the beginning of the season. But with projections, and this is kind of an aside at this point, but when you're looking at projections, it doesn't really matter how close a projector is to the total. It matters how consistent they are across all of their projections. So somebody can project, like I did stupidly, McDavid for like 108 and then Kucherov for 102. Or I think it was the reverse, but either way. So you could still kind of use that as a guide without necessarily the points being right. I'm trying to defend myself. There's no defense, but
You are a hack
that's
man, and that is it.
yeah, pretty much. I guess my point is it doesn't really matter if somebody making projections is conservative or not. It just matters if the relative projections to other players in the league are in line.
Yep, exactly.
All right, my last piece here is Ovechkin skipping the All-Star game again and is going to be suspended again, which is
Shocker.
I guess not totally surprising, but I liked watching Ovechkin in the All-Star game, even though I swear he was just drunk the whole time.
I mean, if his Stanley Cup win is anything to prove by, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving us into the injury report. The first one is Ricky Rax. He is day-to-day with an upper body injury. Don't really know much beyond that, but it seems like they're kind of ruling him out game by game, so we'll see. Darcy Kemper is week to week with a lower body injury, so Ronta is, of course, vaulted until, I don't want to jinx him, but until he gets hurt, it seems to always happen. Next up, Torrey Krug and Charlie McAvoy are both day-to-day with upper body injuries. We've got Jeff Skinner out 3 to 4 weeks with an upper body injury. We've got Calvin DeHaan and Brent Seabrook done for this season, both with shoulder injuries. I think Brent also has hip stuff going on. They're both getting surgeries, which opens up avenues for your little darlings of Dennis Gilbert and Connor Murphy.
I love them. How about Dennis Gilbert getting his first ever NHL goal after being called a short-term or long-term target? I think we inspired him. I don't want to take credit for it, but I think we played a small part in the universe. Kind of butterfly effect sort of thing. I think we did something there. Yeah,
we'll see. The next injury related player here is Oliver Bjorkstrand, week to week with the rib injury, one of the many that we killed. Cam Atkinson is day to day with a lower body injury. We've got Anthony Mantha, who is out about a month or so, which was just updated with a rib cage injury. Aaron Ekblad is day to day with an upper body injury. We've got Jason Zucker out 4 to 6 weeks with a broken leg, or like a fibula fracture, which is a broken leg. Joel Armia is week to week with an upper body injury. Brendan Lemieux is now week to week with a hand injury. We've got Anders Nielsen day to day with a concussion, so you never know what that's going to mean. Ilya Mikheyev is 3 months with a wrist injury and then will be reevaluated after that nasty cut. And then that's it for the people going out. The people coming back, we've got Patrick Hornquist returning. I don't know what that means for Rust deployments. That'll be an interesting thing to keep tabs on. As far as, I don't think it'll affect his fives deployment, but I think it might affect his, stupidly, it might affect his power play deployment, but we'll just have to keep an eye on that one. Next up, Cale Makar has returned. Alexander Edler returned. Victor Arvidsson returned. Eric Halla, Craig Anderson, and Zach Werenski all as well returning from their injuries. And that's it for the injury report.
Okay, and then moving us into drop candidates. My first one here is an injured player, Jeff Skinner, center left wing, 65% owned. I know he's injured, but he was doing nothing before the injury either, and he was very clearly a drop candidate leading into his injury. I dropped him in our 12-person league that's really competitive, and he's been sitting on the wire ever since. No one's even thought about touching him, and so I think that especially, I think at 12 or less, you are very clear to drop, and sure, you can use him on an IR plus slot or IR slot, whatever you have, but I wouldn't really keep him over somebody else. Like, I think at this point, I'd rather keep Oliver Bjorkstrand on an IR plus slot if you only have one, for example, than Jeff Skinner.
Definitely. My first one, although I don't think this is necessarily the week to do it, is Rope Hintz again. I think he's been on here a couple times, but center left wing, 32%. His ice time's all over the place now, which is just another nail in the coffin. Played 9 minutes a few games ago. Just inconsistent. He's still, at least in the most recent game, featured on that top power play, so you might be able to get some points here and there, but I still like him as a streamer spot. I don't like him as a long-term hold.
Yeah, agreed. I think we said on the holiday special he's like a 40 to 45 point guy, somewhere around there we put him. That's just not worth holding on to.
Right.
Oh, this second one hurts my soul. This one is not fun at all, and that is Timo Meier, the San Jose Sharks, left wing, right wing, 73% owned. Now, I want to give a little bit of an explanation on Timo Meier because it's not as clear cut as just drop, right? It's a little bit different here. First off, if he is your worst player on the team, a streamer spot is worth more than him. That's just kind of how it is. If he's your worst player, it almost doesn't matter how deep your roster is. he's worth a drop at this point, and a streamer will be worth more than him if he's your worst player. Anything shallower than a 12 person, I think he's droppable. I think in a points only league, he's droppable. And there's a few reasons for that. His shots have not been very consistent, they've come down a lot. His minutes have come down a ton. He's just not been good here for a while. And a lot of it just has to do with minutes. If you look at his last 3 games, he's averaging only 14 minutes a game. If you look at his last 30 days, he's averaging just around 16 and a half minutes. It's just not, he hasn't been good. He's not shooting as much. His power play time has evaporated the little bit that he did already. He's just not getting the opportunities that he got last year that propelled him to a 69-point season, or 66-point season, rather. And so right now, it's just, even in my 12-person points league, I'm very much on the fence about dropping him because he's my worst player. I keep benching him. And at some point, you just got to kind of give up on a player. I think I'd try to shop around, but at this point, anyone just needs to open up his player card, take a quick glance at it, and say, hell no.
Yep. It's awful, but I still, man, I don't know. I don't know what I would do because I feel like I would have drafted him so high that I'd just kind of fall on the sword with him and hope that something happens. But seeing him play 10 minutes in one of the games that's just brutal. It's really hard to defend.
It's hard to say this, right? Because I drafted him, I think, in, let's say, the 8th or 7th round, if I remember correctly, somewhere around there. And the problem, a 6th in one league just because of peripherals. But the problem with him more than anything for me is just that this isn't a new development. This isn't like all of a sudden now he's playing 10 minutes and he sucks. This is a long time now. This is 13 games now that he's on a 38-point pace over, only 145 shot pace. Shooting percentage is actually slightly high there. His IPP is fine. His on-ice shooting percentage is low, but all of the Sharks shooting percentages are low. Not getting much power play time. Like it's just not good. I can't. To me, when a player becomes your worst player that you're benching all the time, and there's not much upside, at that point, a streamer is worth more than the player. And Timo Meier fits the bill perfectly for that, in my opinion, unfortunately, at this point.
All right, my next one is 88% owned, Jacob Trouba. Now,
okay,
I have specifically for
reservations. Okay, specifically for
peripheral leagues, he's fine.
Yes, there you go.
But when I say peripheral leagues, I think he should at least have blocks, though. I don't know that I would hold him in like a 10-person standard Yahoo league. I just don't see him getting the points. The peripherals are nice, but I don't know that they're good enough to warrant hanging on to him long term. The fact that he's 88% owned means he's being held in lots of points only leagues and all these other areas where there was a lot of high expectations because we all thought he was going to get top power play for the entire season. Certainly doesn't look that way now. And so you're chopping off a big part of his value add and was why he was drafted fairly high in a lot of leagues. With that in mind, I just don't like him. I don't like him at 88%. I still like him on some teams. I don't like him at 88%. It's not the right that's not the right percentage of ownership, in my opinion.
So in my Yahoo Standard League, and this is just in Yahoo Standard League, he's ranked 125th on total, and he's 96th on average. So he's averaging just around 2.5 hits a game, 2.5 shots a game. I like him. So I agree with you. I think that if he is your worst defenseman and there's people on the wire, especially in shallower standard leagues, and he's not worth it. But if you already have a good defense core and you just kind of need to up your hits or shots, I like him as my worst defenseman.
Yeah, I just think 88% sounds like way too high to me.
I agree. Yeah, I think 88% is people holding out hope that he gets top power play when there's, like you said, way more teams that shouldn't have him. My next one here is an Edmonton Oiler, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, center left wing, 69% owned. The only reason to hold Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is to hope that he gets on a line with McDavid. That is it. That is the only reason you hold Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And to me, Brandon might disagree with me here, but to me, that's not worth holding. I don't think it's worth it. He's been brutal here for a while, similar to Timo Meier. He's barely on a 50-point pace right now while having a week on Connor McDavid's line. They've now split that up, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on his own line. Connor McDavid is back with Draisaitl. And so again, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins fades into irrelevancy. It's just not worth holding just for the hope that he gets on that line with McDavid, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's I don't know how to feel about him anymore. The he still feels like somebody I'd want to hang on to, but I don't know how much of a leash I'd give him if I actually had him, which I don't in any league. Um, the fact that he still plays crazy minutes at least makes me a little bit more optimistic than I am about a guy like Meyer, who's you're seeing significant drop in minutes. But again, like you're saying, if he's not producing, and he's not, then what are you really getting out of him? He's not going to get you peripherals. He gets you mediocre shot totals, and that's kind of it. So, yeah, I don't know. He's available in one of the listener leagues, and nobody's picked him up. So,
Yeah, I mean,
I guess I agree.
and I think that largely what happens with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, he's the guy you end up benching a lot because his peripherals aren't that great either. He's inconsistent. His points pace isn't great. And so really you're almost always just benching him in hopes that maybe one day for a stretch he'll be with McDavid. And that's just not, like I said, I just don't think that's worth it.
Yeah. All right. My last one here is Jacob Slavin. I'm surprised to see he's still 55% owned. His peripherals are okay, but I feel like I'd rather just have a streamer spot. And I think people are holding on to him long term for too long, especially when I see guys like, spoiler alert, he's going to show up in long term targets again. Sami Vatanen sitting at 8% owned. It just makes you think that either everybody's inactive or people aren't paying attention to some of the defense changes around the league.
I think people sometimes with defensemen look at minutes a little bit too much. And there's minute crunchers in the league that end up getting very highly owned, like Slavin. Yet from a fantasy hockey perspective, remember that there's this dichotomy of the two worlds, right? There's the fantasy hockey world and the real world. In the real world, Slavin is extremely valuable as a minute cruncher, plays very important minutes for the Carolina Hurricanes. But those minutes don't actually translate over to relevancy in the fantasy hockey world. And in the fantasy hockey world, a guy like Slavin is virtually useless. And there's a lot of other guys like that too that get very high minutes. Provorov, I kind of used to be like that before he got top power play, just extremely high minutes, but didn't really do much. Clefbaum last year was like that. Great minutes, high minutes, just not translatable to fantasy. And so, yeah, Slavin entirely droppable. Moving on to long-term targets. My first one here is going to be Jaden Schwartz, who has been hot for a little bit. I really like his deployment right now. I like what St. Louis is doing. He's been pretty consistent. Now, granted, over the last 30 days or so, his shooting percentage is extremely high. It's at 17%, and his on-ice shooting percentage is 10%. And over the last 7 days, which are the last 3 games, it's even higher. And so, of course, that's a little bit of concern, right? You have a high unsustainability there. But on the season itself, he's actually very sustainable. And so I have no qualms about how his season has gone as a whole. And I would actually hope that he kind of continues to be more of a 12.5 to 10% shooter, somewhere in that range, as opposed to, of course, right now, what's been 17% over the last 13 days or 13 games. So I think he can get, he's obviously going to regress back to that normal shooting percentage, but I think even what he does, he's still really worth it, especially as a wing at 42% owned.
Yeah, he was actually my first one as well. And my second one, we already know who he is, right? Sami Vatanen, 8% owned. He's dropping in ownership. He's got 4 points in his last 5 games. He's dropping in ownership. I don't understand.
People people like to touch nice things and they hate to touch bad things. I think people are just very sour on the Devils and don't want.
But why drop a guy that's playing well?
I don't know.
I don't know who's dropping him. Who was like, oh, he's my worst player.
I mean, I guess in a points league, maybe in a
points league, he's been good. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know.
I hate everybody.
He's on a point per game pace over the last 3 games. He's on a 47 point pace over the last 14 games. So that's 8 points in 14 games. Yeah, he's been pretty good recently. Just a little bit. Yep. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't know how he's only 18% owned still. My next one here is also a defenseman, and that is going to be Baby Edler, Ryan Graves. Defenseman, 51% owned. Actually, I'm a little bit surprised that he's so highly owned already.
Yeah, that's really high.
I can't believe that Ryan Graves got to 51% so highly. For example, with Vatanen is sitting at 8%, right? Like, that's pretty insane. But there's a lot of things to like about Ryan Graves, especially in a dynasty league, for example. Minutes are climbing a lot. He's at 17 and a half minutes around on the season. But over the last 14 games, he's at around 20 minutes of average time on ice. So it's come up a lot. And that's resulted in a way, way higher shot pace than anyone could have expected. Over 200 shot pace at the moment. And his hit pace is pretty is just so nice, and his block pace is super good. So he's slowly turning into a mini multi-cat monster, and maybe if he could get more minutes in the future, could actually turn into one. And his point pace is actually really solid as well. Over those last 14 games that I was talking about, he's on a 47-point pace, has 88 points in his last 14 games, similar to Vatanen, but with way more peripherals. So Ryan Graves is a really fantastic option, especially in peripherals leagues. Even in shallower leagues, honestly, his block, he ticks off so many boxes that he's a fantastic option.
Yeah, I agree. Got him in a league or two, actually. My last one here is Gustav Nyquist. Left wing, right wing, 27%. He's been good for a while, and I feel like he's fallen a little bit under the radar. But I think the bigger thing that I like about Nyquist is with all of the kind of injuries going on in Columbus, the door is open for him to kind of break out a little bit. I think we already are seeing his numbers increase. He played nearly 23 minutes in his last game. He's done that a couple times now. So I think we're going to see him kind of comfortably at like a 19, well, at least an 18-minute pace or above of ice time on a given day. And with that is going to come, hopefully, points. He's never going to be a big peripheral guy, so you use him for, what he's going to give you, which is maybe the occasional power play point, but mostly just regular, old-fashioned 5-on-5 even strength points and like mediocre peripherals. He's not like amazing or anything, but 27% seems a little low for what he's been bringing. And I think it should be on your radar at the very least, considering the amount of minutes and the versatility that it gives them as a left wing and right wing available player with, their entire right wing side out on injured reserve at the moment.
Yeah. I thought about putting Gustav Nyquist here as well. Just like you said, I think the biggest thing is just that there's so many injuries that there's so much to take advantage of there for Gustav Nyquist.
Yep.
And I'm actually going to stay in Columbus, and I'm going to admit I was wrong on this guy. And I don't know if I was necessarily wrong on the player, but I was definitely wrong and underestimated Tortorella and how defensive he is. And that sets up very nicely for a goaltender normally. And that's where Joonas Korpisalo comes in, goaltender, 67% owned. 91.3% save percentage, way better than last year. And there's a clear path to why he has gotten better, and that is his high danger save percentage. His high danger save percentage last year was below average by quite a bit. He had a 77.3 high danger save percentage, and the average is around 80.3-ish. That's like the average of normally of a high danger save percentage. And this year, he's right at the average. So you bring up and make a ton more high danger saves, which to me is just him becoming a better goaltender and being able to handle the starts better. And he's played fantastically. And I think that the system in front of him has gotten better. And he himself is playing way better, like I said. So to me, he is a long-term option. And I think that if you're struggling in net, he's one of my favorite options to go after as a second goaltender. Not for wins. I just don't see... Columbus actually does have a pretty good team, but I just don't see them competing a ton for wins, given the teams that they have in their division and how hard some of the other Eastern teams are as well. It's just very hard for them. But I really like him for save percentage, for saves, and for goals against average going forward. That's the big difference I see.
I only like him for saves. I still think he suck. And I think Columbus suck.
I don't know. I'm not super. I don't think Joonas Korpisalo is a elite goaltender. Even with this
strictly average.
But I think that the system around him brings him up. Similar to Talbot on the Rangers when Tortorella was there. Similar to, for example, back in the day, Martin Jones on the Kings. What we might be seeing with goaltenders in Arizona sometimes. Like just that kind of thing where the system is just good around them and it makes them good. And that might be what we're seeing here with Korpisalo. So, and sometimes good systems can take average goaltenders and make them look really, really good, especially from a fantasy perspective. Okay, moving into the week preview and talking about the schedule, it's a weird one. There's not a ton to take advantage of, so I think I will preface this whole thing with that. I think this is a week where I would potentially, if say you only have one streamer spot, right? If you only have one streamer spot and you're in a categories league, I would probably look at peripherals and try to target that. It's easier to dominate or tackle peripherals with less starts than it is points. If you think you're going to fall behind in points by a lot, you're not going to get that much out of 3 starts extra unless you get really lucky. Whereas peripherals, you can predict pretty well how many peripherals you can get out of a guy by looking at averages. So normally on slates like this, I like to look at peripherals way more than I do points. And I'm playing Brandon this week, so I just gave away my entire strategy. You're welcome. As
I
though I
don't
was going to
care.
beat him anyways.
I'm unbeatable.
Okay, well,
I don't
we'll
know what's
see.
going on, but I've got the Midas touch in that league for some reason. My
We
team is
will,
not very good, but I keep winning.
except when you play me. So we'll see about that.
We'll
I
just
always
chop like always.
probably we always end up chopping because we know each other too well and we counter each other's moves, and yeah, it's just always. So the week preview, there are a few teams with 4 games, and that's gonna be Pittsburgh, Florida, San Jose, and Tampa Bay. The teams with two games, not two or less. There's none with one. The teams with 2 games are going to be Dallas, Los Angeles, and Vancouver. Dallas is interesting because although they only play 2 games, they play 2 off nights. So those 2 games are 2 off nights. Too bad Dallas sucks and is a defensive team now. The other teams with 2 off nights are Pittsburgh, Carolina, Washington, Detroit, and Nashville. And knowing that, my short term targets, my first one is going to be Jared McCann on Pittsburgh, with the caveat that maybe Hornquist takes his power play spot. But if he doesn't, center left wing, 21% owned, he's been pretty good here, and I like his deployment a lot. And if he continues to get that deployment, even with Hornquist back, I like him especially because they get a tired Ottawa. They're rested versus a tired Ottawa team on Monday. And then worst case, you pick up McCann for Monday, and then you can drop him for whoever else later in the week and max out starts.
Yeah, I had McCann as my first one as well. The second I saw that they're playing against tired Ottawa, I was like, okay, it's just somebody from Pittsburgh. It doesn't even matter who it is. But yeah, if McCann keeps power play 1, he's in a great position to get some points on Monday and start your week off strong. My first one, or I guess my second one, is Robbie Fabry again. Left wing, right wing, 9%. Mantha out a month again, so we're going to have Fabry get an extended look, most likely, on top line. They also got that 2 off nights at the end of the week, so it's not somebody you need to pick up on Monday. Maybe somebody you pick up on Friday, so they play against Dallas and then against Chicago. They're both away. It's not the best schedule in the world, but it's hard to find anybody that has off nights. So Fabry's a decent target. He's not going to get you peripherals, though, so this will be more of a point upside move. His shots are okay, I guess, but you're basically looking for points with him.
I'm going to stick with Detroit and actually recommend Tyler Bertuzzi, left wing, right wing, 47% owned. He's also a really good option whose minutes have been pretty good here, averaging 20 minutes on the season, just around, let's say 19. I'm being generous and rounding up a little bit too much there. But he is on a 65-point pace on the season, on a 60-point pace over his last 11 games. Of course, you're not going to get much in the way of shots, but he's a points guy. It's kind of weird. Tyler Bertuzzi was a guy who entering the league I thought was going to be a big peripheral guy, and he kind of was that first season. He had a pretty decent peripheral season, those first few games he played when he got called up. And now he's pretty much strictly a points guy. It's really not at all what I expected from Tyler Bertuzzi. But for this week, he's a really good points option, in my opinion. Been playing really well. A lot of things are kind of right in line from sustainability. For whatever reason, he's like a 16 to 17% shooter. I don't know why that's who he is, but it is. And his on-ice shooting is right in line.
All right. Well, on that note, my next recommendation is a guy that has not been sustainable at all, but continues to just do things anyway. And that's Erik Haula. Center left wing, 21%. He's got the off nights. That's the name of the game. That's always the name of the game is streaming. He's got the off nights. So it's not exactly the best schedule. They have to play against the Caps and then against Tampa, but Tampa hasn't exactly been, bulletproof this season. So they're both at home, and they get a tired Tampa. So there's a decent shot for some good points there from Haula, who seems to just have a great shot or whatever this season, be in the right place at the right time every time the puck comes to him. So at 21%, he's pretty widely available. Coming off that injury, he's already got a goal on his way back. So I do like him. I don't know that I like him for a long-term hold, but I like him while he has the proper deployment. He actually had that 3-point game. It wasn't just a goal, but we're also seeing his ice time climb up to 20 minutes in his last game.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
He's not. I don't think he's a long-term hold. I just don't like his deployment that much, and I do think his shooting pace this season has been stupid. But you know what? Just roll with it. You're looking for anybody that might be able to get you something, and Haula seems to be getting people stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty insane that he's on a 25% shooting percentage at the moment, too. He's only played 19 games in the season, though. So, granted, there's a lot, there's still a lot of time for him to come back down to earth. 19, it's not completely unreasonable the player has a 25% shooting percentage over 19 games, but over 82, that's just not going to stick. So I would expect Howlett to slow down, which
Unless
I mentioned
you're William
on the last
Karlsson 2
preview.
years ago.
Yeah, unless you're William Carlson and it just continues for whatever reason. And in that same vein, another guy that I like from Carolina is Nino Niederreiter, who's just been good here. It's kind of a hot hand play, really. Nothing more than that. He has 9 points in his last 13 games with a pretty good shooting percentage, actually, at only 8.7%. And his honest shooting percentage is also sustainable. And so he's kind of a sustainable Eric Howla in a way, kind of. Sort of weird, but that's kind of who he is. Kind of gets in on all these points that other people are scoring unsustainably. So I do like Nino Niederreiter. I don't think he's my favorite option. I think I like Howla more, but I don't mind it. And then this isn't a suggestion, but I just wanted to give. I know the guy who's going to be picked up a lot this week is going to be Andre Palat. He's sitting at the top of a lot of people's wires. A lot of people are picking him up right now, and I know he's going to be a very interesting option with Tampa Bay having 4 games. But I do want to give you a little bit of a word of caution there. He's only playing 14 minutes over these last 2 games, which is when he's been playing up on the top line, 17 minutes over his last 13 games, but he has a low shooting percentage and a ridiculously high on-ice shooting percentage over this last stretch where everyone is picking him up. 28% on-ice shooting for Andre Palat.
Wow.
That's not
high.
going to stick. Yeah, just a little bit. So while I like Andre Palat, I think that there's better options. Quite frankly,
He's also not power play 1.
yes.
So
Yeah. So I don't hate the Andre Palat pickup, but I do think there's better out there. I do think I like, for example, Tyler Bertuzzi more if you're going for points only. It's just a better gamble than a 13-minute player.
We had the option. I made a pickup this weekend I did in our one of our shared leagues, the option to pick up Palat or Cirelli, and I went Cirelli.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I still
just
like
for
Killorn
minutes
the
and
most.
Stamkos exposure. Yeah, Killorn, but Killorn wasn't available. So
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, Palat wasn't available either. But I would have actually taken Cirelli over him. But okay,
Well,
my
there
last
you go.
one here is the Nashville Predators' leading point scorer for forwards. He's actually tied with Forsberg now, but whatever. Calle Yarncroke, left wing, right wing, 17%. Never going to be the most exciting guy on the planet, but he's playing power play 1. He's playing reasonably well. Career year for him coming up, it seems like. His shots are actually reasonable. 17% feels actually a little bit lower than I was expecting for him, considering, I mean, he's not having like a break, he is for him having a breakout season, but he's not like doing incredibly. But I did think he would be a little bit higher owned than that. Regardless, I do like him with the off nights that Nashville sees on Wednesday and then again on Sunday. And they're just so hard to come by that basically finding them in any capacity is worth a look if you need them.
And there's your week preview. Good luck to this week. There's not a ton to take advantage of, but again, it's one of those weeks where you can play some origami and figure out what works, because you can have like 4 max starts if you play it right instead of just adding for the whole week. So play your cards right. Take a look. Use our off nights tool on our site, fantasyhockeypodcast.com. We will see you for Unsustainable on Wednesday.
Oh, there's also the roster maximizer tool. If you haven't checked that out yet, just go to fantasyhockeypodcast/tools. It works really well for leagues that don't have utility spots. You can set your entire team into the slots, and it'll save it for you, and it'll give you a nice little rundown of what the best available players or teams are for any given week. And you can pick any week, so you can, even if you're being one of those crazy people that wants to see how to maximize your playoffs, you can drill all the way to playoffs, set your team up what you expect it to look like, and it'll tell you what the best recommended players will be to maximize your starts. So that's actually, Fantasy Hockey Podcast /tools, and then check out the roster maximizer. And with that, thanks for listening.